Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of This Old Doghouse Logistics Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Dickinson, aka the Bodacious Cowboy. Alongside of me, my other great host, Mr. John Brewer. How you doing, John?
I'm doing good for a Friday, Jeff. How are you doing?
You know what? I have absolutely no complaints. This week actually dragged on. I don't know how you feel about it, but I swear my days seemed like it was like waiting to get my driver's license. You know what I mean? It was like, when is this day going to end? Not to say that it was bad. It was pretty good. And a lot of things got done. But you ever have a week like that?
All the time, man. My week was like that too, and it just felt like I was in a constant run the last 4 days. Putting out fires and trying to get the needle moved in certain areas. So, yeah, I feel your pain.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was really pain. I mean, it was highly productive, but things just happen unexpectedly. Welcome to logistics, because it happens all the time where you get blindsided, where you think you're going to have a great day, and it's just like, what the hell,
Exactly.
But hey, you know what? We have a great guest today. I don't really get to say this too often, but when you have somebody that's going to join us that actually has more years in the industry than myself, that's pretty damn good, and I always listen to my elders. So, I'm sure that we're going to have a great conversation. Let's bring him in. Radman. Mr.
Hey,
Radman.
good morning, guys. How you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your busy day to join us. We've got so many good things to talk about. Not too often, and I would say never, do you ever get three guys that have about 120 years of career experience in logistics. It's pretty awesome.
It's been a good career. Every day is a new day in logistics. That's for sure. Lots of opportunities, and you never stop learning.
I know. I think you said, and I was like, whoa, because we both started in 1980, but right. I think you said that you started like 9 months earlier. Like you started in what, June?
June of 80. I started with Celanese up here in Dallas. I'm located in Arlington, Texas, which is between Dallas and Fort Worth is where I'm at.
Sure.
And I started here with Celanese, stayed there for 27 years. And prior to that, I worked for a transportation consultant for about 9 months. And it was more or less a placeholder until I got a real job. I mean, what we were doing at that time was just doing the rate and route guide for Texaco at that time. So yeah, I've been in the industry a long time, seen lots of different things.
Yeah, some good and some really bad.
Some challenging as well, that's for sure. Had the opportunity, though, to work in just about all modes of transportation. I worked in truck, worked in rail, I worked in intermodal, bulk marine, spent some time in Europe, in Germany, back when I was with Celanese. So I had a lot of different opportunities and things that are very challenging activities along the way. Very, very, very good career.
So how did you end up in bulk shipments, hazmat? How did that all come together?
Well, it really goes back to kind of following what my dad did. When I was a kid, my dad worked for Union Carbide, and actually up there in New Jersey, we lived in Cranford.
Okay.
And we moved from New Jersey down to Atlanta with Union Carbide. Then we moved from Atlanta up to Chicago with Union Carbide. And then in 1974, I was graduating high school. And at that time, Union Carbide was getting ready to transfer my dad up to Connecticut. And I'm the oldest of 7. So my dad said, geez, I've moved this family enough. So he decided not to go with Carbide. And then he went to work for a company called Cango Corporation, which at the end of the day changed names to Enterprise Transportation. So they were a bulk tank truck carrier. And he was with them. He was their VP of marketing and sales for 36 years. So I kind of grew up in the chemical industry. And then when I started with Celanese as a young 24-year-old kid, my first tour of duty was in the tank truck area. So I kind of just grew into that. And it's interesting, with the last name of Radvansky, it's not like Smith or Jones. So people know me through my dad. I mean, even today, people say, "Well, "Are you related to Jess?" I said, "Yep, that's my dad." So it just kind of grew into it, growing up in the industry.
Any other siblings in the industry, or is it just you, John?
My brother Fred works for Dyno Nobel, and he's a transportation manager down in Houston, and they manufacture explosives and sort of thing. So he's in the industry as well. But I'm the oldest, like I say, the oldest of seven. But the two of us are in transportation.
John, you got questions, Mr. Brewer?
Yeah, I was just listening to all the good information there. So I was taking it all in. But yeah, Jeff, I know you've forgotten more about hazmat shipping than I'll ever know. I've dabbled in it a little bit in my career, but not obviously not now. There's nothing hazmat about hamburgers, but maybe the industry that I came from, it's hazmat has changed so much through the years. Can you kind of take us down that path and kind of say, let us, tell us how it is right now versus how maybe it was 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I guess one of the things I've seen in the industry in general is, or at least my philosophy when I was on the buying side was, we formed longer term partnerships with our suppliers. We if our we didn't go out for the annual RFPs and driving pricing down into the ground. We had our suppliers. If they did a good job for us, they kept us safe, they kept us legal, kept us competitive in the marketplace. Then they were our carriers. We didn't threaten their business every year by saying we're gonna run RFPs and auctions and whatnot and switch carriers. I've seen a change from that. I've seen more of the larger companies. Like, for example, I saw a post not too long ago where there was a major hazmat shipper that posted a post out there on LinkedIn about congratulating all of their shippers of the year. I mean, this carrier is wonderful. They're hazmat carrier of the year. This is our safe carrier of the year. And in the same post, they're talking about going into their annual RFP. So I've seen more of a shift towards not so much the partnership, the relationship side, more shift towards running RFPs and more driving prices into the ground. And I think that, to me, that's concerning.
Did you just do, like, depending upon what the market was doing, John, like a GRI based on when that stuff shipped, volume increases, all of this, whether up or down?
Yeah, we did some of that. I mean, they would come to us sometimes. We had the relationship where if they needed an increase on a lane or something like that, they could come to us and we talk about it, and vice versa. If we were getting killed on a lane and we needed some relief on that lane, we could talk to them about it. We had the relationships where we could talk about the good and the bad stuff. We tried to have quarterly business reviews as well, where we would alternate sites. So it was not like it was all just one way. I mean, we would go down to the truckers' terminals and have a business review there. We'd have our business reviews at our shipping points just to get everybody involved in the same mindset there. We did some benchmarking rather than just running RFPs and using RFPs to drive pricing down. We actually used CLX to do some benchmarking, and we're able to determine that our rates were actually at or below the market. So we had different mechanisms to make sure we were competitive.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, John, I can see where those long-term relationships. I mean, in this industry, they're all pivotal, but especially in that hazmat category because there's so many rules and regulations. You definitely want somebody who's partnering with you to be there for the long haul because they're the ones who do it day in and day out, and they're the ones who wear the new regs when they come out and able to implement those. But I tend to agree with you. I think the market as a whole is seeing that annual RFP type situation go out. Typically, in my previous life, we really didn't do a lot of annual RFPs. We would do what I call surgical RFPs, where we would take a part of the geography of the country or just a certain area and just bid it out, kind of like similar process to like cycle counting inventory. You just
Mm-hmm.
kind of worked around the country and helped out. But yeah, we're definitely big on relationships here. I know Jeff seconds that 100%. So just just to see that it's going, and it probably would impact hazmat a lot more, like I said, because you don't have that much as many rules and regulations in dry van and reefer freight as you do with hazmat. So that's very good commentary there, John.
Yeah.
You say now you're doing bulk chemical. Can you kind of walk
Right.
the audience through that a little bit for those who
Sure.
don't know what that is?
Yeah, I represent now Bulk Connection, and what they are is they're a third-party, non-asset logistics provider based out of Mystic, Connecticut. And they actually contacted me a few years ago. Charles Kilzer, who I used to know back when he used to call on me when I was with Oxaya, contacted me after he knew I was kind of in the transition between roles, and said, "John, this is something you might want to take a look at. You've got a good, uh, extensive network in chemicals out there, and it might be something you want to look at." So I did a little research on Bulk Connection. They've been around since 1987, formed by a couple of ex-Matlack executives, and Matlack used to be one of the largest tank truck carriers in the nation. Now you'll see their name. That they lease trailers and ISO tanks and things right now in today's world. But when I looked at the way that they do business, I said, "Yeah, this is something that I think that I can get behind because safety is paramount." So they've got they're not the kind that are going to go out there and low bid something just to get the business. So their safety's number one. They've got an extensive network of vetted carriers across the nation. So they've got a team there that does nothing but checks up on the safety ratings and the quality ratings of their carriers. They're ISO 9000 certified, so their processes are documented, and just seem to be a good outfit. Excellent communicators. So I decided to go ahead and focus my efforts with them. As a former shipper, I kind of understand what some of the pain points are for hazmat shippers. And I can give you for an example. When I was a shipper, we didn't use brokers that often. We did on the truckload side, but on the bulk side, we told our carriers, well, you have to handle those bad lanes along with the good lanes. And when I think back about that, I said, what does that really make sense? What you really want to do is you've got your core carrier base. I mean, that's great. You're loyal to them. They do a good job. They're safe. They're legal. Let them do what they do best. But if you've got these oddball lanes out there, these cats and dogs that they don't really like to go to, it's either hard to handle product or a lane that they get stuck out there and they can't get a backhaul. Use your broker for that. We've got extensive network of carriers, and we've got somebody that most likely would love to handle that for you. So they'll be able to take care of these oddball lanes for you that are safe and legal and cost competitive. Also found that in kind of the space that we operate in, I'm more successful talking with some of the smaller and mid-sized shippers, the ones that may not necessarily have either the expertise or the resources to properly handle their bulk shipping. I mean, you may have a person that they got to do rail, they got to do intermodal, they got to do terminals and warehouses and hazmat and all this stuff. So if there's something that you can take off of their plate and let them focus on some of the other things, that's where I've been able to I guess be more successful in onboarding new customers. So we're not everything for everybody. I mean, we're not going to be those ones that are going to low bid on auctions and things like that. But if you want a quality carrier, somebody that's safe and competitive, that's where we're going to come in.
Yeah, that's similar to how I ran the business at my previous employer. We were shipping food commercially, and the lanes that occurred every week, we tended to keep on asset players, and then the ad hoc lanes that came up or the additional, like during the peak season when you ramp up 30-40% of your normal volume, then we would go to a broker and hand that off to them. But it's definitely was not as complex as hauling bulk or hazmat, because it's really the food and security and safety were really the only main points of concern.
Well,
So
you've got a whole different set of concerns with food, though, right? I mean,
yeah, you got, I mean, it's, there, we're always watching, there's been a lot of talk over the previous years, probably ever since 9/11, about terrorists attacking the food
right.
supply.
Yeah.
And doing that straight out of the back of the trailer. So it's food security and food safety are paramount. And especially in the company I'm working at today, you don't want to get anybody sick. You don't want to have anybody get killed, or die from your products. So
Right.
you have to you have to be on your game. You have to watch. So just curiosity. My previous employer actually hauled food grade bulk.
Okay.
Do you handle any of that?
Sure. Yeah, we've got carriers that handle that as well. Whether it could be kosher, so you have to have your
That's what
kosher
I was gonna ask,
kosher
yeah.
washers or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, definitely have have carriers that also handle food grade, both
You know,
on the dry side and the liquid side.
Yeah, talking about that, it's a good point, John. John, John, when you talk about your food grade, do you have kosher grade food, and do you have a oh God, I'm trying to think the term, not a priest,
Oh, Rabbi.
a rabbi
Rabbi.
come in and bless the food itself before it's shipped.
Which
Which
John?
John?
Yeah, Mr. Brewer. I should say Mr. Brewer from that one.
Or you can call me
Yes.
Radman. People call me Radman.
Yeah, we did have the rabbi come in and bless the food before it left wherever it was picking up at. Yes, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
the reason why I was asking, because I had learned about the kosher thing in my previous job, and I had never thought about that before, and so that was kind of interesting to me that a rabbi would come out and basically bless the load in the truck. So there's worse things to have. I would be happy if I was a truck driver to have somebody come out and bless the truck. That's anything I can get to help me and keep me safe. I'm all for it. So
Yeah, there you go. The reason why I ask you is that I ship, and I currently do, even on the international side, bulk in blotter bags,
Okay.
virgin balsamic oil, vinegar, and some of them come in totes. And before it's released, the rabbi comes in and has to make sure that it's kosher, all this other stuff, and then once it's, because there's a time, when you're talking about food grade material. It all has to do with timing, because there's an expiration date on a lot of those food products,
Right.
as you well know. And so they have to actually schedule the rabbi to come in at the estimated time of arrival from this raw product that's coming in from either overseas or even domestically, where they have to be able to have him come in, check it upon arrival within hours, and make sure that turnaround happens and out the door it goes. And then it has a certain period of time in which it needs to reach its destination by. So it is critical in some areas, especially with the food.
absolutely, yeah.
On the bulk side, also, I mean, there's a lot of last content requirements on the tanks. We've had to have the rabbis come to our actual physical loading facilities and look at the tanks, look at the hoses, look at the pumps, the whole 9 yards, to make sure all that was clean. We've also had halal certification as well, which is kind of like the I guess the Muslim version of kosher. So we've been certified when I was a shipper and those processes as well. But the thing about making sure that you have good carriers is that's an extension of your company, right? I mean, that's why when we would ship a tank truck load to a customer, we wanted that thing to arrive and be clean, be professional, be in good mechanical shape, and have the material arrive on test. And it's a direct indication of you as a shipper. Your customer sees that driver, and that's a reflection of your company. So that's why to me it's so important to make sure that you have a good quality carrier management process in place.
100%, 100%, Mr. Radman. And I can say this firsthand, especially when I was on the shipper side, and I'll just use like Panasonic as a great example as an enterprise shipper. I had to make sure that the drivers didn't come in looking like this. All right. They had to be clean shaven. They had a uniform on, right? Their cab had to be clean, because the way that they took care of their cab was the way that they're going to take care of your shipments, the way I look at it. You know, if they're responsible and respectful, they're going to be respectful of themselves and the people that they do business with. And when they walked into a warehouse, I mean, what I used to have is on a transportation agreement, I had expectations and requirements of each carrier. And I always gave the carriers and brokers, service providers, equal opportunity to fire themselves. I had no stress, because it was clearly written out of what it was expected if they're going to move it, because we're talking millions and millions of dollars. And when you have millions and millions of dollars, you've got an upper hand, because everybody wants a piece of their pie.
Right.
You know, the more complex the operation, the more millions that you're shipping, the more everybody wants a piece of the pie. It's just the nature of the beast. So a lot of them, you know, I got to shave. Well, listen, you know, if you want to have this business, you know, you represent me as a professional, image, brand, you know, and the material that you were handling. You represented my company, Panasonic. So if anything went bad on it, and, you know, we can get into safety and all this other kind of stuff at a different time. But if you had an accident and you could have avoided that accident, guess what? It falls back on the shipper. It falls back on the traffic manager, logistics manager, supply chain manager, because your name's just, you know, attached to that. You don't want that burden on your shoulders, you know? And that's why safety was so key. And, you know, you're talking about hazmat and everything. I got all these things, you know, that, you know, you have to live by this kind of stuff, because God forbid, if you're not good at what you do and you don't read these things, the Bible of hazmat shipping, and something goes wrong, you don't want to know about that. You don't want that call. So, you know, that's why knowledge, experience, and helping other people by educating them your do's and don'ts in certain areas is going to help them immensely, because it's not just like picking up a hazmat shipment and saying, I'm going to load it in here. Well, what is it going to be loaded in with what other classes?
Right.
You know, and they don't take into consideration that, God forbid, if something happens and a spark happens or water hits it or something like that, you never know, you know, it will ignite and everything goes up, you know. And if you didn't take those things, you don't have the SDS sheets and all of that, the proper ones that are given to the driver. I mean, logistics is very complicated, you know, especially way back when I was certified in lithium batteries, everything was exploding. You know, the UPS plane that went down the Everglades. Remember that one? And the batteries blew up and all that other kind of stuff, just as an example. I mean, especially after 9/11. And when I had an FBI agent come into Ford Motor Company when I was working there, and he wanted to go over my procedures and everything. Who's packing this? He wanted my signature on it, and I refused. I mean, this is a big conversation. I'll try to make it small. I said, I'm not going to sign this. He goes, well, this is a requirement by the federal government that I do. And I said, let me explain something to you. Unless I physically picked it, packed it, and shipped it, I'm not signing anything, because I have hundreds of people out there, and everybody I, you know, kind of trust, and they're out of sight. I expect them to do their job. But what happens? What happens if somebody comes in, you know, that's disgruntled and wants to do something bad and packs something, and it goes into a plane in a cargo hold, and that plane blows up? You think I want to be responsible for that? I'm not signing all that. You know, that's a good point, you know. And I was like, come on, guys, seriously, think about what you're asking people to do, you know. But the government took a huge stance on that, especially what Mr. Brewer said earlier, especially after 9/11. A lot of requirements, you know, a lot of expectations. People were getting pushed left and right because people started not trusting people, you know.
That's right. My one of my previous lives, we shipped aircraft parts, all over the world. And once a month, we would send a 20-foot container down to, I forget where it was. I think it was India. And the company I worked for shipped all classes of hazmat. So you want to talk about having to know, how much limited quantities you can put with what
Mhm.
you can sit next to what. You try to figure, you try to cram 6 or 7 different classes of hazmat on that 20-foot box. It gets dicey. And you have to know what you're doing, and you can only put so much on there because I mean that thing's. But to your point a minute ago, Jeff, that thing could go up on a container ship, and you got massive problems.
Massive.
Massive. I mean, especially if it's down towards the
The
lower
whole,
the
yeah,
lower levels.
yep.
I mean, it's going to burn so hot, it's going to burn through the other containers, and whatever's in those containers is going to ignite as well. So it can be really bad.
Hey, a great example that you just brought up. Look at that ship with all the EV cars that were on there that started a fire that they had down in Port Newark
Mm.
when all those cars went up and everything. I mean, look at the EVs, and we just had one 2 weeks ago where it closed down an interstate because they said it was too hot and too toxic to let anybody go in there. We're just going to let it burn. So imagine that sitting there in a cargo ship, as you mentioned, or even in a 53 footer, and it starts on fire. Lithium batteries, whatever it might be, you can't easily put it out. You just have to let it sit and burn. I mean, what does that tell people? You're talking about safety, you're talking about hazmat. What it tells me is they put the cart before the horse. They didn't think of all the what if scenarios and what happens if this happens. How are we going to respond? The same thing happened with the fire departments and the jaws of life when these people are getting in accidents and they didn't think about, well, I got to cut through the structure. Well, guess what? These electronics and everything that are hooked up to these massive size batteries go through the frame of the freaking car, and they didn't think about it and cut through it. And guess what? They're getting electrocuted and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, these are the kind of things in logistics. It's not simply just packing up a truck and moving it. You've got to think of the what if scenarios because it will bite you in the ass. It will bite you in the ass because there's a high probability it's going to happen.
Yeah.
One of the items that we shipped was called an oxygen generator, and anybody who's flown, then when they do the safety safety presentation, they'll say the mask drop from the top and put your mask on first, yada, yada, yada. Well, they don't have tanks of oxygen sitting in the belly of the plane. They have this thing. It's an oxygen generator. It's about the size of a can of hairspray. It has a strike plate and a chemical inside. And once the strike plate hits the chemical, the byproduct is oxygen, which flows through the mask.
Interesting.
But essentially what this is a bomb.
Yes.
And if I remember very avidly sitting here talking to one, we had an aircraft over in Europe. It was on the ground. They called it aircraft on ground, losing tens of thousands of dollars an hour while it wasn't working, needing an oxygen generator because the FAA wouldn't let them leave without it. And I had a very terse conversation with the guy from FedEx and said, well, look, man, I said, you already have these things on your plane anyway. And to which he told me, Mr. Burr, there's a difference between cargo and equipment. And that was it. I couldn't ship it next day air. I couldn't ship it second day air. I had to find somewhere else to get it to move. So that's the challenges out there. And I know we've all three kind of hit on that today. And you're exactly right, Jeff. You cannot walk into this thinking that, hey, all I got to do is put box A on trailer B and everything's going to be okay. You can't do it. You can't do it.
And other things too, when you're talking about hazmat, and I know this is as a fact because we did it at Jaguar when I worked there. We got seatbelt pretensioners and airbags. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're like hand grenades. I don't care what anybody says. When that trigger is pulled, you can launch people with that thing. We took one out there and that has a pin in it. just like a grenade, and we put a rim on top of it because we aren't going to use the freaking thing. We're like, what's going to happen with this thing? And we pulled it, and this rim went a few hundred feet up in the air, and this thing sent like unbelievable. So when you're handling this stuff, when guys are in a warehouse and you've got these stuff in storage and everything, you just can't like jiggle this thing around and everything. You've got to understand what's in that box. You know, how am I going to move this? How am I going to stop this thing from going off? You know, it's there's so much different things, you know, that you have to be aware of in the industry when you're talking to shippers and stuff. The more, and I said, you know, part of the episode today was gaining knowledge and understanding, and being able to talk, you know, the language in which you're reaching out to that individual, so they know, you know, what you're doing about it, instead of just calling in cold and thinking about just moving freight. Just moving freight is not just moving freight. There's a lot of other different things that are involved in that. And the more that you know, the better opportunities you're going to have because you understand it. You don't have to understand it like you're a rocket scientist, but as long as you have a better perception of what you may move and the ramifications of not understanding what that material is, what it's going to do to you and your company, you know, brand, image, reputation, and stuff like that. If you say you're doing something and you move it and something goes horribly wrong, that's going to leave an imprint on your reputation moving forward. Because once you get that one thing bad on you and you go to another one and you call up a guy, oh, I heard you're Bob. Oh, I know you, Bob. Bob, you had a problem with this other one. You don't want that. You don't want that on your shoulders.
That's right.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. One of the things that I've tried to do is just to be a resource for the industry. For example, even though right now my focus is on bulk, I know rail, I know intermodal, I know bulk marine, I know barges and all that stuff. So people call me and they want to know if I have a contact. I had one person, she needed a contact on bulk storage tanks, on rail, and on intermodal. Well, I gave her 3 contacts. I mean, it didn't do any, in other words, didn't generate me any revenue or anything like that. And that wasn't the intent. It was just goodwill and helping somebody else out there in the industry. And like I said, I don't know everything. I still learn something every day. But if I can help somebody out there, steer them in the right direction, put them in contact with somebody, I mean, that's great. That's I enjoy doing that sort of thing.
Yes, but Mr. Radman, the one thing that I'm going to put out there, and I bet you do this, is that you just don't give out a contact for the sake of giving out a contact. You know this person is capable of doing this. Yeah. You're not going to just hand off something because it may not be your niche. You know this individual, you talk to him or her, and they know their shit. Plain and simple, because even though you're handling this off and you're being a good logistics citizen and helping others grow, God forbid if you gave that person a contact and they reached out to this person and they caused harm, you don't want that either.
No.
So you know that's why I always say to shippers, and I know Mr. Brewer will agree with this wholeheartedly, that you need to understand who your service providers are. It's one thing vetting your carriers, right? And people that you do business with, but as a shipper, they need to do the same damn thing.
Oh,
it's not about cheap freight. It's, it's much more than that. And I used to do that when I was a shipper, because I'd be damned if I was going to go out to a broker or a service provider that I wasn't familiar with, or I didn't do any background checks, and I knew for a fact that I was moving these smart books for Panasonic. Each one of them was $8,000, and at tough books they were. And you're talking about a $2 million load. Do you want somebody that's never moved that kind of stuff moving it? And you're talking about high value, high theft material, that went out to governments and police agencies, you name it, FBI, CIA, you name it. They were using these things, and it gets lifted. No, it's your responsibility as a shipper, as well as a broker, as well as a service provider, to do diligence on who you're reaching out to. Just don't make a phone call and saying, I can do this, whatever. Do your homework. And a lot of people disagree with me, but I know I'm right on this.
No,
Absolutely.
you're the shipper. You're the shipper of record. Regardless of what happens, you are the shipper of record, and you need to know who you're doing business with. And if
Correct.
you're dealing with a broker, you need to understand that broker has got rock solid processes in place and carrier vetting, and they're safe and legal and whatnot. Just to say, well, that's the broker that screwed up. No, you're the shipper of record, and it's going to come right back on you. You need to know who you're doing business with. I mean,
and the way to do that,
line.
and I bet you, Mr. Radman, that you'll agree with me. Really good shippers are going to have detailed list of hazmat requirements and questions that they're going to ask you, because the bigger the enterprise shipper, they're like rocket scientists. They're like Einsteins. It's not just like talking to a mom and pop freaking shipper that the kid just graduated from high school or college and they're starting up and you don't do anything. The more complex the operation, the more intelligent these people are. You got to get on that level. You have to speak their language. It's not as simple as making a phone call and bullshitting your way through to try to get a client on board. These guys are smart, and you've got to outthink the thinkers, the way I look at it. If you're good at your job, you're going to know the questions that they're going to ask you, and you're going to be able to either refute them or agree with them or even give them better suggestions and options that's going to make you look like a hero.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Yeah, usually the referrals that I give out, people I've done business with for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, these are known companies and known resources and people in my network that I've known. I'm not going to just refer somebody that I'll Google somebody, say, oh, try these people. If I don't know anything about them, that's going to be up to them to do their due diligence. But if it's like there's a truckload broker that I've dealt with for 20 plus years. Somebody needed some truckload. Well, I referred them to them because I know that when they were our truckload broker, they did us a fantastic job. So I felt very comfortable with that referral. So I mean, that's the type of contact information, the type of resource that I want to be. Because if I can help somebody else out, one of these days when they do need bulk transportation, they'll say, okay, I remember John. He helped me back when I was looking for some rail support or some terminal support or whatever. Let me give him a holler and see what he can do for us.
Hey, I just got to thank our sponsors. Give me 1 second here.
Sure.
Here we go. In today's market, having an effective sales engine that shortens your sales cycles is critical, and that's what makes Beta Consulting Group does for its clients through sales and marketing strategies that help you stand out from the competition. Reach out to Trey and his team today by visiting www.betaconsultinggroup.com. You won't regret it. So check out my friends there at Beta Consulting Group. Tell them that the Bodacious Cowboy sent you over, and they'll take care of all your needs. We appreciate them sponsoring this show, and they're good people. Thanks, guys. All right, let's get back to what we're discussing. So where do we leave off?
Just on recommendations, I can tell you right now, I cannot recall one time in my entire career I actually tendered a load to a coal carrier. Mm-hmm. I would talk to them like John, like Radman said, I want to know these people, putting my fate, my brand, my reputation on the line. And that's even before you get into the bulk and hazmat stuff, which can really cause some damage. So I can tell you right now, if you're cold calling me, chances are I'm not going to give you a load until we have some type of discussion asking those questions that Jeff mentioned to vet out the carriers. And if you don't think a shipper can smell bullshit, if they've been around long enough, they can smell it a mile away, and they're going to walk you right out the door if you try to bullshit them.
And vice versa on that. Okay. If you're a smart service provider, broker, you can also smell out when a shipper really doesn't know what they're doing. Right. Because you're going to ask those questions, which is what I call finding and opening up the hidden bank opportunities. Because if you ask those questions and they're hesitant, just like you as a shipper asking your broker, and as a broker, you're hesitant in being able to respond quickly, they're going to be able to pick that up right away. It's either you are or you aren't, period.
That's right.
Yeah, not all business is good business. We know that for a fact. So you have to be just as selective on both sides. So you've got to interview your customers and you've got to interview your suppliers. I mean, it just makes good business sense. One of the things that I think really helped me in my career also was when I was in the industry, I spent as much time as I could at our plants, manufacturing sites, at our terminals, visiting the carriers, visiting the railroads. I've been when we had our Stolt tankers come into the marine terminal. I spent 2 years at the bulk marine terminal. I was on board those ships from the top all the way down into the tanks, into the engine rooms. Spending time in Germany, also understanding how we operated over there in the overseas market. So, and then I spent some time in procurement as well. So 5 years in procurement, buying packaging materials and consulting agreements and investment recovery programs and things like that. And then spent time as a planner, also a distribution planner. So planning terminal resupplies and stuff. So that was one of the things about being in the industry, is that I had the opportunity to do a lot of different things.
Yes.
And with when I left Celanese after 27 years, I went to Oxea, which was a spinoff of Celanese. And that was the perfect size company because you knew everybody. We were on 2 floors. There was 45 people in the headquarters. So if I needed marketing, right down the hall. If I needed financing, right down the hall. I knew all the salespeople. So it's just the perfect learning environment to understand how the company operated from A to Z and everything in between.
Yeah, you need to collaborate with all key stakeholders within an organization,
right?
Because you can't really do your job without sales and operations if you're a logistics manager. When you talk with your carriers, suppliers, vendors, manufacturers, you need to get them involved because they know what they're procuring, what's coming down the pipe, what's going to be shipped at a certain time, etc. The more you know, the better off you're going to be able to build a long-term business relationship with your service provider, because they're brought in not to discuss, accessorials and rates and everything, but as a partner with you. You're making them feel like a partner because they're involved. And that's the biggest word, get them involved. Don't be in a rush to move freight. It takes time to build those relationships. Like Mr. Brewer said earlier, that he's not going to give you a shipment because you made a call. He doesn't know you. He wants to have those conversations that's going to make them all feel warm and fuzzy, that, you know what? This guy, this woman, whoever really knows their stuff. I'm going to give them a test run and see what they do. And if they do it well, then we'll expand on our business. But until then, I need to dot the I's and T's.
Exactly. And another thing that I found helpful, and you guys being spending some time on the shipper side, logistics touches everything and everything touches logistics. And one of the things that I could do, and Jeff, I think I mentioned it on a previous podcast, is there are efficiencies to be gained in other areas if the logistics group can have some tricks up their sleeve, how to make things happen. And so what I would do is kind of almost like a pay it forward type deal. Is, if the operations guy is struggling with something that logistics can correct, by doing X, Y, and Z, then I went ahead and did it. He didn't have to ask me. I just said, I came to him and said, hey, I took care of your situation here. This is how it's going to work from here on out. Because just being in logistics, you're going to have to call those markers in from time to time, and it helps to have more markers out there than you actually need. And you're going to have to call those favors, and that also builds that partnership with your interdepartments as well. And builds a relationship, because the guy says, look, I didn't even know how to fix it, and you already come in here and told me you fixed it, and my life's easier now. So building those relationships internally is just as important as building them externally.
Yeah, there's a lot more ways than just reducing freight rates to take costs out of transportation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Absolutely. I say I teach it all the time.
I tell people doing an RFP is a temporary solution to a permanent problem.
Right.
And you know something? That's one thing I failed to say earlier when Mr. Radman was talking about RFPs. I'll never do a lengthy RFP at all because one, I want to put more money back in the shipper's pocket because if the market switches, right, you pay high. That they always say, oh, you pay high during this time and then it drops, but then it balances off throughout the year and you get to a level playing field, right? No. I do maybe 3 months out, and I'm going to say, you know what? Listen, as a service provider, I want to protect your best interests, and I hope that you want to do the same for me. So what we're going to do is reevaluate the lanes and seeing what the market is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do spot market. I'm the first to say I don't dabble in spot market. I hate it. I don't want it. I'm just a dedicated service provider. I'm an unusual broker that I don't even call myself a broker. I'm more of an SLSP, a shipper turned logistics service provider, because I'm a little bit different than others and why I do the things that I do. So with that said, it kind of protects both sides. As a service provider, you're not going to lose money when things get bad, right? And vice versa with the shipper, they're not going to do the same thing. When it switches, you ride the wave with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what a partner does, right? You can do the cost plus program where you kind of say, you know what, it's going to be cost plus 5% on everything across the board. This way, you know that when it comes to freight payment services and accessorial fees, everybody has the same thing. Nothing changing. You already know how it's playing out. You know, it's just one way to skin a cat, as I would say. But the thing is that the more you communicate with the shipper, right, as well as the shipper returning that favor, and being able to say no, being able to agree to disagree, and still be a partnership after that, says a lot of things. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that can't say when they're wrong or say
Mm-hmm.
no to things. They're yes people. Worst thing ever in this industry is being a yes person.
Yeah. Whenever I'm involved in cross-functional teams and we've got a situation, to your point, John, I don't sugarcoat it for them. I tell them where the icebergs are, and then because I don't want them to be surprised. I don't like being surprised. I don't want them to be surprised, and I don't want them to have unrealistic expectations as to what we can do. I mean, the bigger the company, the less nimble it typically is. And I tell people, I said, we're an ocean liner. We're not a speedboat. So it's going to take me about 3 miles to make a turn. It just doesn't happen with the snap of the fingers. And some people who are not from this industry don't understand that. You saw a lot of that, during COVID when the toilet paper fairy stopped showing up at the grocery store. So that's, people who are not in this business do not understand the sheer magnitude of what it takes just to get things done.
Yeah, during COVID, I did a contract job back at Celanese where I was the import-export team leader, an operations job. And we had a team of 13 people. And our role was to get containers in and out of the U.S. During COVID. So you talk about a daily challenge because with the ports being backed up, with there being no trucks, with with 100 ships sitting outside of Long Beach trying to get in there.
Yep.
So we had to have daily conversations with our marketing and salespeople on where the containers are, what the priorities were. We had one guy who really got upset with us, and he was over in Europe, and he said, how can I commit to my customers when we're going to make these deliveries if you guys can't get them here? And I said, first off, you better find out what the process is capable of first before you make your commitments. Because right now we're in a very unusual situation where containers are stuck on ships. And they didn't like to hear that, but that's being realistic. Say, hey, this is what's going on right now. Tell us what the priorities are and we'll see what we can do. But the other challenge I ran into during that point in time, and I think some of this may be getting lost, is nobody on my team had ever been to the Port of Houston. to see a container ship, to see what they look like or any of that. So I was able to get a couple of people to go out, visit the ports, which I think is something that, like I was saying earlier, I spent a lot of time when I was in the commercial side in operations as well. And I really think that to be a well-rounded logistics person, you need to understand the commercial side, but you also need to spend time in operations. You need to get your hands dirty. Talk to the truck drivers, talk to the people loading the trucks, visit customers where you can. I think that in the long run is going to just make you much more efficient, more knowledgeable, be able to provide a better service. So
That's why you and I get along great, because if I know you've read my content and posts and stuff like that. I've always said this, Mr. Radman, and I think it should be applied in every single brokerage or service provider out there. Before you get involved into a brokerage operations, logistics operations, go visit a freaking DC, a warehouse, go for a ride with a carrier. Understand the mechanisms of logistics and how they turn and burn. Will you learn everything in one day? Hell no. But the thing that you're going to take away is a perspective, a different perspective as to what you're dealing with and why things are done a certain way. The more knowledge that you gain, you can't learn this in college. I say this all the time. Am I against college? No. Am I for street smarts? Hell yeah. Because if you get in the trenches and you work alongside each department or process or whatever, like you said, John, you did, I did, there's nothing better than that in the whole logistics world, because you're physically doing something and you understand it. They don't teach that in college. They teach case studies. And that's they already have the answer to the question when it's a case study. When you get into logistics and the mechanisms of logistics and the blind sides that you get, you can't sit there and wait. When there's an urgency, an emergency, you can't go to the books and say, I have to do this, I have to do that. You got to hit those toggle switches as fast as lightning, because every second of the operation, you're going to lose a shitload of money. I mean, when I say that, I mean, it's like Ford Motor Company. And you probably heard this, Radman, too, and John, that every minute is $10,000.
Yeah, you shut down a unit, a production line.
You're toast, And when I worked for Ford Motor Company, they got drilled in the back of my head. Very complex, very demanding, no excuses at all. You had to get shit done, period, because you don't want a bunch of the brotherhood sitting on a line waiting for a container or several to come in, and they're twiddling their thumbs and on the assembly line, and it's the ripple effect. Everything costs money all the way down. When you get that embedded into your head and you understand that complex stuff, you are in prime position to win constantly all the time. If you think about those what ifs, I say it all the time. Look at those what if scenarios, because in logistics, there's a high probability that something horribly is going to go wrong. When that happens, how are you going to respond?
That's exactly right. When Radman brought up going to see the terminals and the DCs, and one of the things that I've always found beneficial, I'm that guy too. When my first job in the industry was a short haul dispatcher, and I actually were an asset based player. They were running cab overs, and I rode out with the drivers. Perfect. And just to learn what they're going through. But also, if you go to a customer's distribution center and you understand what they do and you understand the services that you can provide as a broker or a carrier, then you can say, hey, I see you got heartburn in this area. I got a service that will, maybe streamline it for you and make it smoother, and it's not going to cost you anything extra, or it's part of just value added service or whatever you want to call it. You're to Jeff's point, your perspective dramatically changes, and it gives you assets to use in putting things together, putting pieces of the puzzle together.
Correct.
You've got your view, you know how your view works. You've been in the industry for a while, you feel pretty good about the company you work for, you know what they can do, what they can't. And then if you pick that extra perspective up from the customer or the potential customer, then you can say, hey, here's where we mesh. Here's where we can really shine for you. And this is how we're going to do it. And that's going to help you get that foot in the door with that customer, because you care about their business too. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask them to take you on a tour of the facility.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you're talking about because you've obviously done it before, and you know the synergies between the organizations to make a win-win for that customer as well as yourself. There's not a downside to that at all.
No, it boils down to the relationships, because most of the time I was in headquarters. So, and that's where it was so important, I think, for those of us in the headquarters to get out in the field.
That's right.
Spend time with the people in the plants, because otherwise, they think, oh, here comes another jerk from headquarters. No, I would go down there wearing my jeans and take them out to dinner and have a beer with them or whatever.
Absolutely.
Shoot the shit with them and get to know them as people. This guy liked to fish. This guy likes hot rods. This guy likes classic rock like I do. Just get to know these people. And that way they're comfortable calling you when there's an issue, and vice versa. I would go down there, for example, when they would win their safety awards. The railroads Union Pacific and BNSF would give us awards when we had X amount of time with no leaks or anything like that, no incidents. So I would get to go down to the facilities, have a barbecue or a Mexican lunch or whatever, and bring the railroad with me. We present the awards to the people that actually loaded the cars. It wasn't for us in Dallas. It was for the people that actually did the work. And that's how you build the relationships and the credibility. This guy's from Dallas, but he's one of us also. And he gives a crap about what we do, and take the time out to get to know them as people. And I still have friends with a lot of the people I used to work with at the facilities.
Yeah. The biggest takeaway: always make other people feel more important than you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right.
That's the bottom line, because they represent you. That's why you're not really that important. You're only as good as the people that surround you. If you surround yourself with good people, your life is going to change. If you hang out with the wrong people, that's not giving you any value added things to think about or anything, that's when you're going to fail. That's when you must hang out with like-minded people. Don't hang around with the people that have that negative mindset. That's not going to help you develop or get to where you need to be or where you want to go. Find those people. They're out there. Find those people that have those positive mindsets that's going to set you straight and tell you the way it is and not bullshit you. They really actually care. And that's what we are together, all three of us, right? And there's many more of us that are still out there. It's our responsibility to make the industry better than what it is. They may not want to hear it because they don't understand it. They don't understand it because they didn't have that experience firsthand, and they think it's a bunch of crap. It's not. We're not just doing this to ego-driven or trying to put ourselves up there. We see things differently than other people, and that's why we're doing these things here.
That's exactly right. We are stewards of this industry. Quite honestly, anybody in this industry is a steward of it. And part of that stewardship is leaving the industry a better place than when you found it. And that's exactly what we're doing. And it's probably the main reason we're doing this podcast is we're trying to, not only educate and inform, but we're trying to leave this industry in a better position than when we found it many, many moons ago. So, and then the relationship that Radman was talking about, the value of that is just doing that kind of stuff is just, it's very little investment, but the return, the ROI on that is huge. I mean, to Radman's point, I mean, you got relationships that span 20, 30, 40 years. Well, that happened because you approached the same way Radman did. You got to know the people. You went down and you showed people that, hey, we appreciate you and we appreciate you getting the safety award and being safe. And, you pay that stuff forward, it's going to come, the ROI is going to come back and it's going to be immense.
I can tell you, as a mentor and coach and disciplinarian, I've had all of those, and I got my ass kicked over the years, not afraid to say it. But when you mentor and coach somebody and you see them climb that mountain and level up and constantly level up and get to it, there's no other better feeling as a coach or a mentor that, you know what, they actually took something that we talked about, they implemented it, and it freaking worked for them. You know, we're not good for all people. There are going to be a few out there that's going to take what we're saying and our options and possible solutions and implement them, and other ones are going to go, these guys are old, you know. I mean, but seriously, those that do it and rise, that's why we're doing this. If I get one person, and Mr. Brewer and I talked about it, if we have one person that does something that they took from this show, we've done our job. We have done our job.
So we're at the top of the hour. John,
Yes,
Radman, you got a parting thought for the fellow malcontents out there in the LinkedIn world?
This is what I want him to answer.
Okay, I think.
Why are you still in the business, John? Why are you still in the business, and how did you get this far?
Well, I'm still in the business because I enjoy it. I enjoy the daily challenges, but I also like people. That's one of the challenges that I've had is working from home has been a real challenge because I I enjoy being around people. So I enjoy my network. But I think the thing is to stay curious, ask lots of questions, hang around with the right people. I mean, one of the things I joined recently was a networking group over in Fort Worth, and this group is just to talk to people, to get to know people, help each other out. It's not a big sales pitch or anything. You don't go in there and try to sell your services. It's just a group of like-minded people that get together and talk about the industry. So stay curious, be helpful, be a resource to people. I'm 68. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon. I don't know if I'll work till I'm 80 like my dad did, but
like my dad too.
Yeah, but no, unfortunately, I just lost him 3 weeks ago. But he was 93 and lived a good life. But I learned a lot from him as far as relationships. I mean, you just can't place a value on how relationships will work for you in the future. So like I say, I enjoy the industry. I enjoy people. I enjoy helping people. So that's kind of why I'm still doing it.
So, Mr. Radman, I'll end with this. Am I going to see you at the BCS, the Broker Carrier Summit in Fort Worth?
I don't know yet. I've got some conflicts that I got to work around. I know that I definitely can make one of the happy hours in the evening, but I've got
glad to have you.
I've got some daily conflicts, that doctor's appointments and things that I've got that maybe I can move around. I don't know, because Fort Worth is only 30 minutes from where I live. So one way or another,
I know that a lot of people can learn from you. I know for a fact. So I'd love to see you there.
Well, and vice versa. I mean, I can learn from a lot. I've learned so much from just the people on LinkedIn. I mean, I've been involved, like most people, when COVID hit, that's when I really jumped into LinkedIn, and I've met so many wonderful people here, and continue to learn every day. I spend probably too much time in LinkedIn, but I learned so much there. But
thank you for joining us today. So with that said, catch us next week on This Old Doghouse Logistics Podcast, where we might have another guest, or we might have a subject or a topic that may be interest for you. So with that said, the Bodacious Cowboy is out. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Appreciate it.